It was a beautiful run, too. What a jump cut off the inside zone he made. I really like him. I think he's a heck of a football player.
Now a little flea flicker. They're going to throw it back to Klubnik. Pursuit coming. They're going to throw into the end zone. It's caught! Oh, my goodness. Antonio Williams.
Steal. I mean, Adam, let him cook. Let him cook, people. From Ben via email to open up the show, Ben writes, Kevin, you know I'm not a big fan of Adam Peters or Dan Quinn for that matter, but I have to concede that Peters knocked it out of the park over the weekend. Styles was a steal. They got a polished, ready-to-play route-running wide receiver, a future starting center, and one of the running backs you mentioned is a good day four pick. AP killed it this weekend. It's great to have a real GM leading this process. Good morning, everybody. No, we're not doing a lot of this today, FYI. The grades, the winners, losers bit, the thumbs up, thumbs down bit. Nobody knows anything. I mean, Ben doesn't know anything. You don't know anything. I don't know anything. Adam Peters barely knows anything at this point. He knows more than we know, and he'll be wrong more than he'll be right. If you're into the value conversation, I'm up for that. That's fine. The thing where you kind of compare where the Skins picks came in relative to where they were supposed to be picked based on a consensus of mock drafters, which is somewhat nuts to begin with, but at least there's an element of something objective, something quantitative from that viewpoint. Ben, I appreciate, and Ben writes me often, I appreciate that you listen and you write me all the time. So don't get too upset with me because I went back and checked out some of your previous emails from this time last year and then during the season, some of your past musings. Ben, last year after the draft, Kevin, how great is it to have a real GM who knows how to draft? My favorite player from this draft, the linebacker from UCLA, he's talking about Kane Medrano. Turnover machine. And then Ben wrote in November after they got absolutely pummeled by Seattle, Kevin, you need to reconsider your position on Peters. He's the reason they're not able to deal with all of these injuries. Bad drafts, bad free agencies. This guy needs to go. Yeah, the back and forth, the pendulum swings on how we feel about our leaders of this football franchise. This is a great weekend because it's entertaining as hell. But I've talked about this for years and many weeks leading up to this. This is so secondary in terms of being, declarative on anything to the games themselves. And the most important thing about not only the immediate future, but the medium future and the distant future when it comes to this franchise. And that is Jaden Daniels, the quarterback. Did they get it right? I think they did. Certainly his rookie season would say they did. There's not a lot from year two that you can take away that say they did, that says they did or didn't because he didn't play enough. But I think the most important thing about this franchise right now is not grading Adam Peters' drafts the day after or during or a few weeks after. You can't grade the draft until 3 years have elapsed. We can grade it in 2029. That's when we can grade it. Or after the 2028 season, early in 2029. Hopefully after a few playoff games in 2029, in the winter of 2029. But you can't grade it now. I mean, you can do it for giggles. But it means nothing. These grades and these thumbs up, thumbs down, these winners, losers segments, they're all for content. People love the draft. And we're going to talk about the draft a little bit. And I want to hear from you, not about a grade, not about whether or not Adam Peters was cooking this weekend, because, God forbid they start out 2-2, you'll want him fired at the end of September, early October, just like you did last year after he was cooking with the draft and cooking from 2024. It's fine to have these swings, but just recognize what they're based on. This is not something in the moment that is of substance when it comes to our opinions. We don't know. Nobody knows. We'll know in 3 years. We're going to know at the end of this year what the 2024 draft was. I went through this exercise last week with the number 10 pick over the last 20 years. Remember, I did that last week or the week before, Max? In the last 20 years, every number 10 pick, and it was just done for the number 10 pick, as if to say, well, this is a top 10 pick. And basically 75% of the players who were picked, number 10 overall in the first round, had either been a total bust or amounted to very limited contributors. But the best of the best, the 25%, most of those players that turned into really good players did it with a different team, not the team that drafted him. Now, Patrick Mahomes was number 10. That was a good pick. And they didn't know year one. They knew year two, though. Didn't take long with Mahomes. There are certain players you kind of know pretty quickly. When you throw 50 touchdown passes in year two, in your first year of starting, you kind of know. That's why with Jaden Daniels, I get from some of you occasionally, I thought it was too early. Hadn't been 3 years yet. Yeah, you're right. You're right. To really know for sure, we need one more season. We need him to play. And it could be that it's because he doesn't play. That's why it was a bad pick. He doesn't play enough. We'll see. But that first year, you can pretty much say, yeah, they didn't get it wrong. Not after a year like that. Let's get to it. What do you got? I am going to give you a thought about each draft pick. I will. It's just a thought. Nothing declarative. My what do you got is Monty Coleman passed away over the weekend at the age of 68 years old. Monty Coleman played 16 seasons as a Washington Redskin from 1979 through 1994. He was truly one of the great defensive athletes in franchise history. He was a safety in college at Central Arkansas. He ran a 4.4. He was one of the first drafted linebackers in NFL history, talking about the draft, because Monty Coleman was selected in the 1979 draft out of Central Arkansas in the 11th round of that draft, 289th overall. But he had been a safety for 3 years in college, became a linebacker in his final year. And the discussion really was about this guy who is probably more of a safety than a linebacker because he runs 4.4. Well, he played linebacker in the NFL all 16 seasons. And he was really, really exciting to watch. You know, it's funny about Monty Coleman. I know that he has not been well for a while. Dan Quinn had a lot of the former players out there. I think it was last year. It may have been 2 years ago. I'm forgetting exactly when. And Monty Coleman was there. Quinn did a thing with past players, invited him back, which was super first class. And I know that from people who were there that he was not looking great. He had been, sick for a while. 68 years old is just way too young, obviously. But in conversation since last night and hearing the news with various friends about Monty Coleman, what's interesting about him is there's not like a play that stands out. There's not a game that stands out. There are things about Monty Coleman as a player that I immediately mentioned as part of a text thread. He was such a great athlete at the position that Gibbs used him on the kickoff return team as a reverse returner. Like, here comes the kickoff, and we're going to hand the ball on a reverse to Monty Coleman. That was actually made a thing. A linebacker playing on special teams and getting the ball on a reverse as a runner, as a returner, by the Cowboys in the 70s with Hollywood Henderson. Thomas Hollywood Henderson in the 1970s was one of the most athletic players in the league. In the Cowboys, now he had a lot of issues, drug issues, lots of issues, but he was such a gifted athlete, and they would use him, and he actually had some big returns. Well, Monty Coleman was that kind of athlete where he's wearing number 51 and they're running a reverse to him on a kickoff return. He was dangerous. He was so good on special teams as, a gunner, as a return, on the actual punt team and kickoff team. And then as a linebacker, I described, last week in talking about Sonny Styles and his athleticism. And I just said about Sonny Styles, phenomenal athlete. I think he's got a chance to be a good player. Who knows? Scheme, fit, opportunity, all that matters. He certainly seems to be the whole package in terms of intelligence, locker room, athletic, the whole thing. We'll see. There's no guarantee. Of those top 10 players, more likely than not, 6 of them are just going to be average to terrible. And 4 of them will probably hit in that top 10. Hopefully he's one of the 4. But I talked about Styles last week saying, the insane Indy Combine numbers that he put up that, and Ben mentioned this to me when he was on Friday, that he had talked to a GM who said, those numbers are a little bit inflated based on what his real athleticism was. And that was what I was trying to describe, is that if you actually watched Ohio State and you watched Sonny Styles, he's not a Sean Taylor blur on the field. He's athletic. I mean, he's a really good athlete. He can really run, and he is high motor, high intellect, the whole thing. But it's not like you're going to see a Hollywood Henderson type of athlete or even a Monty Coleman type of athlete on the field. Monty Coleman got from point A to point B as a blitzing linebacker as fast as anybody. He was Richie Pettibone, one of Richie Pettibone's favorite players. I mean, he spanned that entire run. As a rookie, he was on the 79 team that lost a game in the season finale against Dallas 35-34, which really was the moment in which, everything changed because they didn't go to the playoffs. Riggins held out the next year. They had a bad season. Pardee gets fired. Gibbs gets hired. If they win that game, it's a whole different, trajectory from that moment forward because they would have been the 1 seed. Talked about that game many times, but Monty Coleman came in on that team and then was a part of 3 Super Bowl winners and 4 Super Bowl trips. There are only a few of those players from 82 that were on all of those teams. The team that lost in 83 to the Raiders, the team that beat Denver in 87, and the team that beat Buffalo in 91, which I think was the greatest team in franchise history. That's the greatest Redskins team of all time. The 91 Redskins are flat out one of the great teams in the history of the game, and Monty Coleman at 34 years old was a big part of it. Played all 16 games that year, had an interception, had a forced fumble, had a fumble return. He was a big play dude, and if he got his hands on the ball, look out. He had, over the course of his career, 3 interception returns for a touchdown and 1 fumble return for a touchdown. I was looking at those totals last night because I thought they might even be higher. But he had some fumble returns and interceptions. He had 17 career interceptions. And when he got his paws on the ball and picked something off, he was a threat as a returner. He was a great locker room guy, and by the accounts of everybody over the years, and I started to think about, from Doc to Jake to guys like Brad Edwards, who played on that 91 team, and others, I just remember various people, almost without even asking, bringing up Monty Coleman as if to say, don't forget, we had Monty Coleman on that defense too. Yeah, Wilbur Marshall, was a beast, not Richie Pettibone's favorite player. Monty Coleman was Richie's favorite player. Wilbur Marshall was not as coachable for Richie as Monty Coleman was. But on some of those great defenses, you always were reminded by his teammates. Don't forget, Monty Coleman was on that defense. Yeah, we had Mel Kaufman, we had Rich Malott, we had Wilbur Marshall, we had, all of these different guys, but Monty was the constant during those years. He's in the Redskins Ring of Fame, 2015 entrant, probably should have been much sooner than that. No, he didn't make a Pro Bowl. He wasn't an All-Pro. He wasn't a starter, for a lot of games in his career. Many times he was reserved. Now, he got a lot of snaps, and he certainly was in there on passing downs because he could cover and he could blitz. Sad. 68's just too young. Sympathies out to his family. Monty Coleman, rest in peace. All right, we'll talk more draft. Get back to it when we return. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. So Warren Sharp, who covers the league, we've had Warren on the show many times, really good with gambling stuff. advanced numbers stuff. He does, the net rest advantage thing that we talk about when the schedule comes out every year, because it has proven to be a real thing. The teams with the least amount of rest over the course of, 18 weeks, 17 games tend to perform at a worse rate than those with more rest, meaning, a Sunday to Thursday or against an opponent that, is coming off a bye is never a really good rest situation and usually doesn't turn out well for the team. He does this thing every year where he looks at the draft and looks at everybody's class and then compares where they drafted the players to an actual consensus of mock drafts. There are a couple of guys out there. Ben Robinson's one, Arif Hassan is another. They put together these consensus mock drafts where they take a lot of mock drafts. Ben did it with like top 10 guys, but these are in the dozens of mock drafts, and they put together a consensus big board that says, here are all the players that are eligible for the draft, and this is the consensus spot in which the mock drafters believe this player should be selected. And then you actually can measure, a prospect on where he's taken versus where he was supposed to be taken. Now, it's mock draft consensus. This isn't the 32 NFL teams consensus on their boards. So we are talking about those that aren't getting paid to pick the players, but it's one way to measure. There are people that invest a lot of time year round to trying to evaluate these players to the best of their ability. And they take from all of these mock drafts, and you end up with kind of something that Warren Sharp refers to as draft capital over expectation, DCOE. It's a metric, and it measures expected capital used on a prospect versus the actual capital used. All right. Again, where the player was picked versus where the player was supposed to be picked. Well, with Warren Sharp's group of mock drafts that he used off the consensus big boards developed by Ben Robinson and Arif Hassan, Washington had the best overall DCOE of the 32 teams that drafted over the weekend. Draft capital over expectation. And I'll tell you why. Here was the class. All right, ready? Sonny Styles, expected to be picked at number 5. That was his consensus big board number, was picked at 7. So Washington got 2 spots of value with Sonny Styles. See how this works? Now let's go to the number 1 overall. Washington's 5th round selection of Joshua Josephs, the edge. He was expected to be picked at 77. So somewhere early in the 3rd round. He was picked at number 147. That's a gain of 70 spots. All right, or 70 spots below where he should have been taken. Washington drafted Joshua Josephs. If you believe in this, that's tremendous value. Katron Allen is the running back, as Ben mentioned in his email that I read in the opening segment to the show. I liked Katron Allen more than I liked Singleton at Penn State. I think Allen's got a chance to be a good runner. I like him. Well, we'll see. I liked Damian Martinez a lot last year before the draft. He's not even in the league. Katron Allen, the running back from Penn State, was selected by Washington in the 6th round at number 187. He was supposed to be picked based on the consensus of all these mock drafters at 130. So they got him 57 spots lower than where he was supposed to go. The center from Michigan State, Matt Gulbin, was supposed to be picked at 168. He was picked by Washington at 209. It's a gain of 4. That's 41 spots lower. And it goes on and on. Antonio Williams, the wide receiver from Clemson. I'll tell you, there is a wide receiver I wish they had drafted there. I did not talk a lot about Antonio Williams last week because I actually really liked Zachariah Branch from Georgia. But I know that there were some potential character things. We'll see. But Williams was expected to be taken at 66, all right, which would have been a compensatory pick at the end of the 2nd round, and he was picked instead early in the 3rd round at number 71 by Washington. So Good job. Washington, number 1 in the league. Number 1. They got really good value based on that specific objective criteria. Taking all the big boards and saying, here's where each player is supposed to be picked. Washington got tremendous value based off of a consensus of mock drafters. Now, what does that mean relative to the teams? The 49ers were asked a lot because these consensus big boards are now out there and discussed by fans. So you take a team like the 49ers in this draft, they took several players much earlier than they were supposed to go, including their first pick in the draft. DeJon Stribling, the wide receiver from Ole Miss, he was not supposed to be the first pick in the second round. He was supposed to be more of a late night 2 pick. Kalen Black, the running back from Indiana, was supposed to go late in day 3, not early on night 2. But John Lynch was asked about that, and he said, "Yeah, we don't pay attention to the consensus mock draft boards. We have our own board." And I'm sure a lot of teams have their own boards. I have no idea if you were to take all NFL teams and their boards and their numbers on these players where they had them, if it would be close to the mock drafters. I don't have any idea. I would guess that there would be so many outliers among the 32 teams that it wouldn't resemble necessarily the consensus of the mock draft boards. That they're just getting evaluated much differently. And remember, they have so much more information on the personal stuff, on the medical stuff, which the mock drafters generally do not have. And that tends to be a rather important piece of information. Is this guy a terrible person or is he an injured person? Usually the teams know that, and a lot of times the mock drafters don't, which would mean that their boards would be probably different than the consensus of the mock draft boards. But it's one objective way to say, without telling me what you love about the players, because most of you didn't even watch any of these players. Maybe you've watched some highlights since they've actually drafted. I guarantee you, most of you have not watched like all 22s of the players that they selected. But that's a way to evaluate it. So from that standpoint, okay, looks like they didn't reach for really anybody in the draft. The quarterback that they took from Rutgers in the 7th round wasn't actually supposed to get drafted, but in the 7th round, there are a lot of players that weren't supposed to get drafted that end up getting drafted. The 7th round is best player available, but usually best player available for a need. And they view, quarterback as a need. They don't have a 3rd-string quarterback necessarily on their roster. And eventually Marcus Mariota is either going to leave or retire. So that, based on that, golf clap. They got some good value. Now let's check back in 3 years to see if they got it right with Sonny Styles. See if they got it right with Antonio Williams. I like Antonio Williams. I'll just say this again for what it's worth. For me, Zachariah Branch is a mini Tyreek Hill. Now, I don't think anybody's Tyreek Hill for real. But if you watched a lot of college football and you watched a lot of Georgia, this dude is electric with the ball in his hands. And I think he was a better route runner, a better receiver over the middle, even though most of his receptions were at the line of scrimmage. But I know that there were some issues, potential, personal issues. They, for all I know, they didn't even have him on their board. A lot of these players that you may say, well, why didn't they draft this guy? Well, we didn't have him on the board because we know something about him that you don't. I liked Ted Hurst. I know Ben talked a lot about him on the show from Georgia State. Especially given his size, where Williams, again, is another primarily inside guy. I'm not saying he can't play on the outside. I do, after watching more of him after he got drafted, I do think that he looks like a polished route runner, and they clearly like a lot about what he brings to the table. You knew they were going to draft a receiver more likely than not. You knew that there was going to be another edge rusher. You knew there was going to be a center. From a needs standpoint, we'll find out if they got the right players, but from a needs standpoint, they've done a really nice job since the season ended. The last 6 weeks, there has been an emphasis on defense and on filling some of these needs with hopefully better players. We won't know until they start actually playing NFL games. But in terms of like just going down the board, I when they were on the clock at 71 on Friday night, and I was looking at the receivers that were still out there, I was like, I really love Zachariah Branch. I like Jacoby Lane. Brazel, we'll see. There was some stuff on that. And Ted Hurst was the other one. I had a feeling, just based on how many times Ted Hurst's name was mentioned by Ben and even others, I had a feeling that was going to be the pick. And then it turned out to be a receiver that really we didn't talk a lot about. Doesn't mean we're right. I liked Chris Bell from Louisville. Talked about that last week as a potential pick. When we got to the 5th round, at that point, I was thinking center, but that guy that our guy Cole Kublik told us about, Brailsford from Alabama, had already gone. He had gone, actually, I think it was the pick right before Washington. If you go to that 4th round, Parker Brailsford, a center from Alabama, last week, for those that missed it, was a player that my guest Cole Kublik from the SEC Network swore was perfect for kind of the offense that Washington was going to employ this year. He said that there were various times this year where he considered center Parker Brailsford to be the best player on Alabama's team, and that he was going to be a major plus. So when Washington got to their pick in the 5th round at 145 overall, was it? 145, 146, somewhere. Yeah. 147 overall. The pick right before they were on the clock by the Cleveland Browns was Parker Brailsford, that center. So they did not get a chance to get him in that 5th round, if that was the center they were looking for. Now, they eventually got their center. We'll see. It's a 6th round center. How many times? Not a lot of times, but certainly he appears to be the part. Matt Gulbin does. He was at Wake before he got to Michigan State, started 34 games over the last 2 years. They love the way he plays with great leverage. They love his IQ. I would expect that would have been part of the calculus with him, as they think he's smart enough. The pick before that, I will just tell you that I was a Katron Allen fan at Penn State. I liked him more than Singleton. I thought he was a guy that, when you watched him, had the vision, had the burst. He had some really, really good games for Penn State over the last couple of years. And I'm looking at the one game that he finished up with. I think it was Rutgers, the season finale. Yeah, here it is. Rutgers season finale, 22 for 226, a touchdown, 10.3 yards per carry. That really upped his overall average. But his last 3 games at Penn State, and Penn State, they had that meltdown and the overtime loss to Oregon, which changed their whole season. They were undefeated. They played that Oregon game early October, late September in Happy Valley. One of the games of the year, goes to double overtime. They came back. They rallied to force that overtime, and Drew Aller threw the pick, on their possession. I can't believe Drew Aller got picked that high. I mean, again, what do we know? Nothing. But God, he was an unimpressive college quarterback at Penn State. He went to Pittsburgh on night 2. But Allen finished the season, after their season imploded, following that Oregon loss. After their season imploded, and Franklin got fired, etc., his last 3 games, Michigan State on the road, 25 carries, 181 yards, 2 touchdowns. Nebraska, and in a win. Nebraska in Happy Valley, a win, 25 for 160. And his final game against Rutgers, 22 for 126. That's 72 carries for 545, 60 for 567 yards and 5 touchdowns in 3 games. That's Rigo playoff-esque kind of running. Really, really good vision for Katron Allen, with some burst and some breakaway ability. I liked him more than Singleton. The one thing that he was not in Singleton was a pass catcher out of the backfield. It doesn't mean that he can't do it. He just didn't do it. Singleton was more of that back for Penn State. Yeah, I think that's my memory of it. I want to see what Singleton had receptions-wise for the season, because Allen was much more the runner. Yeah. I mean, he had 41 catches. Singleton did as in 24. Had 24 catches this year, but Allen was not the screen back, was not the third down, check down back. They ran stuff for Singleton out of the backfield as a pass catcher. That's not what they did with Katron Allen. Allen, though, is a good runner. Again, 3 years, I can give you a grade. I can't give you a grade today. I don't like doing that. It's just, it goes against everything. And I know that everybody's doing it today, but I do think maybe there's some value, at least in something quantitative versus qualitative, in comparing it to where these players were supposed to go based on mock drafts. And which, by the way, these mock drafts are all about subjectivity. But I didn't mind that. Now, do I have a favorite? I like the pick of Sonny Styles. I feel like that's a good pick for Washington. I do like Katron Allen. I like that pick. I have no idea if this is their center or if it's going to be Nick Allegretti. We'll start to know on some of these players and their chance to contribute early by the time we get through kind of, the first part of the summer pre-training camp. We'll hear some things. People will hear something about, man, it's going to be hard to keep, it's going to be hard to keep Williams off the field. He's actually as good as anybody not named Terry. Let's hope we start hearing things like that. But again, that sometimes is misleading as well, and certainly the preseason game results are completely misleading. They don't mean anything. What happens in practice, what you hear coaches say about these players is typically much more meaningful. But man, overall, this offseason, in terms of what the goals, again, I think we were all in agreement, but not everybody was. But I thought defense, and that was free agency. And then they added in their first 3 picks 2 more defensive players. Joshua Josephs has some length to him, looks like he's got some ability. And then, the wide receiver, they added the one, I don't think any of you were expecting it to be Antonio Williams, but I think Brandon Ayuk's going to be a part of this attack by the time we get to the regular season opener. It would be nice to figure out how we can get him sooner rather than later, but not via a trade. I continue to see these reports that the 49ers are still holding out hope, and now that we're done with the draft, still holding out hope that they can get something. No one should trade for his current contract. The contract needs to be ripped up, and it should be a 1-year prove-it deal with not, veteran minimum guarantee, because somebody's going to give him much more than the veteran minimum guarantee, but it shouldn't exceed $7, $8, $9 million. And the rest of it is a total prove-it deal, and then let's see what happens. But you got to be in position where if you find out that A, he can't do it anymore physically because the injury really did impact his career, or B, he's a total wingnut and you don't want him in your building, you got to be able to move on from him with no cost, no lasting impacts. And I'm sure that they will put themselves into that position. Is it possible that the 49ers could say, work out a contract and then send us a 7th, send us next year's 6th, and we'll send you next year's 7th if you work out a new contract with him, if he rips up the current one? Yes, but again, you got to be careful. If you're trading for him, you're trading for his current contract, which is $27 million, and then $28 million the following year. I just can't see anybody doing that. All right, Sean Springs is going to join us at 11. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Give me the pick that you wished they had made this weekend. No grades, no winners, losers, no thumbs up, no thumbs down. Give me the player that you wish they had taken. Somebody that going into this thing you were a big fan of that they didn't take. And if you want to just quickly mention a player or two that they did take and something you like about him or don't like, that's fine too. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. This from Paul. I'm with you on Katron Allen. I'm a Penn State guy, and he's going to be very good as their first down back between the tackles with his vision. And Kevin, he can catch the ball, but they just threw it to Singleton more. Yeah, that's what I said. Singleton was used more as the pass catching back. Look, I think Penn State's just had some issues with Drew Aller. I mean, they were limited at quarterback at times with him. I thought they were. And sometimes just limited with creativity overall, to be honest with you. But I do like Katron Allen. I talked about him as one of the backs that I liked. I really like Jonah Coleman. Was he the third back taken overall? I think he may have been the third back taken overall. I liked him as a kind of a first down thumper between the tackles. Let me just see where he was picked. Because you had the two Notre Dame backs in the first round. No, the 49ers, right. They took Indiana's Kalen Black in the third round, and then Jonah Coleman was the fourth pick taken, and Singleton was taken before Katron Allen. So 2 Penn State backs, 2 Notre Dame backs in this draft. What'd you think, Max? Don't give me a grade, please.
You're not going to get a grade out of me.
Was there a player that you wish that they would have picked?
Honestly, no, Sonny Styles was kind of the big one at the top of the draft, and then after that, it was really for me just filling kind of needs and giving us an opportunity, or giving guys opportunities at positions of need. So like Antonio Williams, wide receiver, Joshua Josephs, who has really long arms. I think that he can develop into something. And then Katron Allen, dude, like we needed a big thumper in short yardage situations, and he's exactly that. Now, will he make the roster? It's a crowded running back room, so we'll see. But then you have Matt Golban, who's they're trying to convert to center. Callie McManus even at the third string quarterback spot. I mean, because what we've seen from Sam Hartman hasn't exactly been great. So I think Adam Peters did a pretty good job at addressing the needs. Now, can these guys step up and actually contribute? I hope so, but we'll see.
All right. Let's go to Chad in Nashville. Chad, go ahead.
Man, Kevin, I was just telling him, I think that was the most exciting first round draft in a long time.
You mean watching it as a television show?
Yeah,
I agree.
I mean,
there was a lot of drama because there was a lot of we didn't know what teams were going to do. And for our team picking at 7, there was there were so many different possibilities of who was going to be left at 7. I enjoyed that too on Thursday night for sure.
Yeah, as soon as Titans picked Tate, which I figured, I'm like, I know you need to help your quarterback out, but like when they took Tate, I looked at my son, I went, whoa! I said that opens up a lot. Now, and I didn't think Sonny would go there. I was still nervous about picking a linebacker, and but I will say, I think the pick I thought we would go Bain. And when Bain fell all the way to Tampa and I saw him walking out, I went, this dude is going to blow up the league this year. And I was like, that pick right there, that's going to be the pick. And I was talking to my father, who's up there in D.C., about the pick I want to take at 7. And when Caleb Downs was still there, and KC jumped up. So KC jumped up and got the corner. And that told me, I'm like, they thought Washington was going to take him. And that was who my other buddy, my Skins fan here in Nashville, wanted too. I wanted Caleb Downs. I'm really glad. I was upset that the Cowboys took him, but I don't have any confidence in that. I will say this. Do you think that grade that Sat put out, and we were number 1?
What'd you say?
All these fans keep going.
That who put out?
The grade that Warren Sapp put out.
Oh, Warren Sharp. Warren Sharp. Yeah, it's not. It's not a grade. It wasn't a grade. It was, a value. Washington did better than anybody else based on where they picked players compared to what the consensus big board of mock drafters said. So if that's something you're interested in, that's actually something that can be measured. They're mock drafters. These aren't the 32 teams big boards. But for what it's worth, Washington had the most value in their picks. They got picks after they should have come off the board, according to the mock drafting consensus.
Well, let me ask you this, Kevin. So if that's the case, all these fans at about 5th round, 6th round, 7th round, and I said, I want defense. All these fans are like, what are we doing? We picked a running back. We picked a quarterback in the 7th round. And then they picked the center in the 6th, but why didn't you do this? Didn't Casterly always say the biggest mistake was drafting for need? And then obviously with that grade, it's not a grade, but that score that you would say, that proves right there that you don't draft for need if you're trying to make your roster better. Mm-hmm. My favorite pick, I think, by the way, is the UT kid. I think he's going to be a situational guy, and then I think you don't end up taking him off the field. I think he has a lot of potential. I saw that he fell because of some off the field problems. But I don't know. You'll have to ask Ben. Oh, I guess that. But thanks for taking my call. Have a good work.
Who knows? I mean, maybe he'll end up being better than Oweh. But at least they got Oweh. They got somebody who's done it at the NFL level. I thought that there would be a good possibility of, in addition to a wide receiver, an edge taken, a center taken. We talked about that. I think the only position that they didn't draft that I thought a player certainly could be drafted at was corner. That's, they didn't draft a corner. Last year, remember, they didn't draft the edge that we thought they needed to draft. So there is clearly some best player available work going on. Billy and Chantilly. Billy, was there a player that they didn't draft that was on the board that you really wanted them to draft?
Yes, Jacob Rodriguez.
Yeah, he was one of my favorite players in the draft.
You have the best starting quarterback in the league. You could have
But
had the best.
they couldn't pick
starting
him.
middle
You know why,
linebacker.
right, Billy? You know why they couldn't
What's
pick
that?
him? You know why they couldn't pick
No.
him?
No,
Well, because they didn't have
I
a
don't.
pick to pick him with.
they didn't.
No, they
They
had
had the
a
number
first-round
1
pick. Did you want him to pick Jacob Rodriguez at number 7 overall?
Yes, mark
Oh.
the tape. You take him with number 7. You have him start for 10 years at middle linebacker.
He's really good. He was a really good college player, no doubt. One of my favorite players to watch this year in college football, no doubt.
So that's what you do. The
Yeah,
problem
well-
with the draft is all these guys are trying to hit home runs. All you're trying to do is pick players that can start on your team. That's all
Mhm.
you're trying to do. And Styles is not one of those guys. Styles is a 1 in 3 guy. There's one in 3 chance he'll be a superstar.
Mhm.
The other 66%.
I don't know. I think his floor is pretty high. I think given the way he played at a high level in college, there's, I think the floor is pretty high for him based on the way he played in football, in college football, and based on his overall sort of desire and intellect. I would disagree with you on that, but you might be right. You could be right.
You're right.
Rodriguez,
I'm
though,
a fan, Kevin.
Rodriguez, like Bain, like Bailey, there were players that just at the college football level, this isn't a projection to the NFL level, but at the college football level, you're like, oh my God, that guy isn't a good college player. He is a great college football player. Reuben Bain was, I think, pound for pound, the best player in college football last year, if Mendoza wasn't. Jacob Rodriguez, top 5 pound for pound best player at the college football level. Now, the projection to the NFL level, there isn't the athleticism that, the scouts like to see. He's got all the intangibles, all of them, but the size, the speed, the broad jump, the high jump, all those things that are super important, right, Billy? He didn't have all that stuff. He just had 12 forced
That's the
fumbles in
underwear
2
Olympics.
seasons. That's all.
They call that the underwear Olympics. Your guy,
Yeah.
Doc, calls that the underwear Olympics.
Doc's
I saw-
been
I saw
100%
Luke
right about
Kuechly-
that for years.
I saw Luke Kuechly in him. I saw Zach Thomas in him.
Zach
I saw a guy
Thomas,
who's
because of the size, yeah. We went to Zach
Well,
Thomas's team, Miami.
to Miami.
Yep.
I'm excited
All right.
about the future of this team. We got JD5. Thank you.
That's what we got. That's what we know. We got that. Just keep him healthy and upright. It's going to be a decent season. Rodney, go ahead.
Hey, as a pure, what's up, Kevin? As a pure fan, I wanted Jeremiah Love because I thought on the short yardage plays that would kind of help JD not think that he has to make, every play, and
Mhm.
they would run the ball on second, third, fourth down. But yeah, that's who I wanted them to pick. But I like Styles. It goes along with my point with JD. If the defense is good and the defense can keep the ball in JD's hands, we're going to be a good football team. So I love the Styles pick. But I wanted Love, man. I wanted a workhorse running back. But I knew why
they
couldn't pick him.
they didn't have a chance for Love. I mean, they would have had to trade up for Love. I certainly would have been. That would have been one where I actually would have had a very strong opinion draft wise. I would have been very much against that, about a trade up for a running back. Thank you though for that, Rodney. Let's finish up with the Lap. Lap, was there a player that was on the board at any point that you wish they would have taken instead of the one that they did?
Well, of course, I wanted Tate or Love.
They weren't
Delane
there.
or Caleb Downs. Yeah, I know.
Downs
I know.
was there,
Caleb Downs was there, and Reuben Bain was there.
Right.
And then you sell me on Sonny Styles, and then we get a quarterback and a running back. I wish we'd have got Sonny Styles' brother. I mean, that defensive end is probably a good guy, but I wish we'd have got Sonny Styles' brother. You don't understand the power of a brotherhood when they playing and competing, bro. And them guys are freak athletes and they can play multiple positions. I would have got his brother. You know what I'm saying, on the team, and I would have been cool with that.
Where did Lorenzo go?
I
I don't even know where he got picked. It was day
he went
3.
to the
I
Saints,
was.
but he was picked. I think he was picked after that defensive end in that same round. What was that?
Okay.
Fifth, I think.
A 5th.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would have got Sonny Styles'
He
brother.
can run
I would
too.
have been cool with that. Yeah. 4.27, second in the compound, Kevin. Second in the compound.
It was. I knew it was.
So,
It was like.
man.
What was it?
Yeah.
4.27. You said 4.27.
4.27. You don't get a guy 4.27. Something is wrong
let's
with
see.
you, man.
Yeah,
Oh,
28
my
Olympics.
goodness. And he can play multiple positions. I think he played receiver before too. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, bro. Whew.
Yeah.
You already told me on the Sonny Styles thing. I would have got his brother.
Well, I personally think that Ruben Bain, just again, for whatever it's worth, I think Ruben Bain's got a chance to be a great NFL player. He was a great college player. The short arms obviously cost him some draft spots. And I think this Zachariah Branch could be really exceptional at the next level. And he was on the board for them on night 2. But we'll see. I mean, in watching Antonio Williams, you know what? My emailer, which I opened the show with, he's not wrong. He is, you can see, a polished, precise route runner, creates separation. And if Ayuk's going to come in and be another outside receiver, you'll have some versatility with Williams. You'll have some versatility with Terry. You know, I don't think we emphasize enough Terry's versatility. We've seen it. We certainly saw it with Scott Turner during some of those years. He was used kind of all over the field. And they really like Traylon Burks. I don't want you to forget about the guy that they really like from last year as an outside big target. Sean Springs, of course, played here, but he also played at Ohio State. I'm sure he's got some opinions about Sonny Styles. You'll hear those next. draft, 2 of the top 3 players were Ohio State Buckeyes. Orlando Pace, who would become a Hall of Famer, was picked number 1 overall by the then St. Louis Rams. And then with the 3rd pick, the Seattle Seahawks select cornerback Ohio State, Sean Springs. Sean Springs joins me right now. I thought of you last week just because of all of the Ohio State players getting selected, and I do want to get your thoughts on Sonny Styles and some of the others. But going back now, coming up, by the way, next year will be 30 years since you were drafted. You're an old man now. But what do you remember about that night and about being selected number 3 overall?
I can't even believe it's been 30 years. That's
crazy.
That's a long time. I just remember, the interesting thing about that night, most people don't realize that the night or a couple of days before the draft, there's some maneuvering that happened. And I remember that it was still the Jets had the first pick, and then the Rams jumped up to the first pick, and they obviously loved Coach Vermeil loved Orlando because he was coming out of the booth and he covered a lot of our games. He was always there, but he loved Orlando. But I also remember the fact that, wow, the 2nd and 3rd pick, I didn't know if I was going to go 2nd and 3rd because of just, Oakland and Al Davis. I had a good trip out there. So I was still unsure where I was going to go. So I was I just remember being in the draft room the next day with my mom and my dad. My dad played in the league, and I just remember talking to Oakland, and they asked me if I wanted to come there at number 2, but they weren't handing out a signing bonus. So I was like, nah, and I ended up being drafted number 3 to Seattle. But I just remember being at the draft probably total of 30 minutes, and then I was on the plane to Seattle. But it was an amazing experience all the way up to the draft, meeting the other guys. Warwick Dunn was a friend of mine, Tony Gonzalez, Orlando Jones, Walter Jones, who was drafted with me at Seattle. Peter Bower was in that class. So we had some good guys, man.
Was Sean, that was back when the draft was held in New York, like the Marriott Marquis, right? Somewhere in Times Square, right?
It was at the Marriott Marquis. You're exactly right. That's where we stayed. That's
where you stayed. And so you were in the back of the draft room with how many players? Back then, how many players did they have present at the draft? Do you remember?
I think it was probably 15 of us, maybe 20 of us, maybe to the top 20 guys. It was kind of I think we were in different rooms. And honestly, I just know that, there was still a potential that I could go 1 through 3, even though we kind of knew it was Orlando. So I was sitting by Orlando. They kind of put me, Orlando, and I think Darrell Russell was, in a different area or whatever. And then I don't know, was it at the Marriott Marquis? I know we stayed at the Marriott Marquis, but it might have been.
Yeah, I think the draft was just there. I think it was. Right. I could be wrong. So I'm looking at it. Seattle actually traded with Atlanta to get into that 3rd spot, and they picked you at 3. Look, your father, played for the Cowboys. I mean, your father was a really good back for the Cowboys during, the Dorsett years and the Danny White years and all those years. And, we Redskin fans remember your father very well. And, you grew up in that environment, but also grew up here and went to Springbrook and, off to Ohio State. So what do you remember about your initial thoughts about going to Seattle? I'm trying to look up who was the coach for
Coach
Seattle.
Dennis Erickson. Coach Dennis Erickson.
Oh, Dennis Erickson.
Dennis Erickson. Coach E was there, and I think he was coming off the championships at Miami, and they were loaded with Miami players. And 2 weeks before, in March, the whole staff of Seattle came for my draft, and they asked me what they thought I was going to run. And then they were sitting at 11. And then the defensive back coach, Dave Vaughn, rest in peace, longtime player in NFL, he kind of led my workout, and I ran a great time that day. I think I ran anywhere from between 4.22 to 4.36. I had a crazy vertical for 24 on a bench press, over 11 something.
What was your vertical?
12 feet. When my warm up jump. So here's the crazy thing about my warm up jump. You know how you do the vertical? My last name was Springs in my group, so I jumped up and just cleared it because we were always taught clear the stack first. So my first clear, I think, was 44.5. And then when Coach K was adjusting it, my strength coach was adjusting it to move it up because we always do our clear stack. So he was adjusting it to move it up. All the scouts was like, there's no need to see whatever. Like
Yeah.
I would have kept going. I probably would have been over 40. I know it was 44 and a half or 43 and a half is my warm up jump, but I've been doing that at anyway, right? So
Well, I was going to ask you.
combine.
I don't know if I've talked to you about this before. Did you play basketball at Springbrook too?
I didn't, man. I wanted to play my boy Darren McClinton and Kevin McClinton, legendary Maryland guys. But I didn't play basketball my junior and senior year. But I was with those guys and hooping at Martin Luther King Park off of New Hampshire Avenue all the time. So, or in Stonegate, we'd be in there hooping, catching oops, dunking. So I could fly, man. I could dunk off my vertical, forward and backwards in high school, I think. And I was a 23-11 long jumper in high school. 23-8.
Did you not play hoops just because you were one sport focused at that point, starting in your junior year?
No, I was starting my junior year of two sports.
Track.
I was track.
Yeah.
I was track and football at Springbrook.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And
so
off to Seattle,
man.
and the rest is history. Great
off
player.
To Seattle, the rest is history.
Yeah.
Hey, I wanted to talk to you, man, with all these Buckeyes going early, man. I'm so pumped and excited, man, about those guys. And the fact that everybody that was on that defense of the national championship team when we played, I think it was Notre Dame, was it 2 years ago, whoever we played and beat, they all got drafted, man. So I'm just Notre Dame. So I'm so happy about that, man.
How did you forget who you
guys
beat in the national championship game?
We got so many national titles, man. Ohio State, we expect,
it's just so many. So many to, you know what? Some people said, how does Ryan Day hold on to his job after all these players got picked in the top 10? He's a hell of a coach, though, as we know. So let's talk about Washington's selection of Sonny Styles. Tell me what you like about Sonny Styles and what kind of fit he will be for, what we think will be a Brian Flores style defense.
Well, what I like about Sonny the most is his pedigree. His father, Lorenzo, was my college teammate and captain at Ohio State. And I remember the first time running on the field, he was telling me, "You better not give up a first down." So that just lets you that lets you know the personality of the mindset of his father, who was an All-American there. And when you talk about that's important, because when you see in the press conference, and something I've been seeing since he was in high school at Pickerton and then on to Ohio State when he was a safety in the safeties room and then linebacker, he is a pro. Like day one, he's been a pro since he was in high school. And a lot of times you get a young player, especially at the Mike position, where he's going to have a lot of responsibility to call the defense, get other people lined up. That can take away from your ability, meaning like sometimes you be overthinking and you got to make the calls. This kid is a film junkie, so let's start off with he's a pro. Day one, plug him in. He's going to know. He's only going to get better. But what you see and what you like about him is he's long. He's 6'4.5". Sonny can change direction. He can go from left to right. He can jump out of the gym. He can dunk. He got great hands. Obviously, he plays safety. He's physical. He's really physical. He can take on linemen. He can ballistic gap. And when I tell you guys, he's probably on a 6 out of 10 of where he can be. He's only been playing linebacker for like 2.5 years. But this kid, this kid's upside. I can't even imagine to tell you guys how perfect of a fit it is with, Coach Quinn, who's had Bobby Wagner, has some great linebackers, and I just can't even tell you the type of talent this kid is and what he's going to do and the speed he just added. It upgraded how he upgraded our defense down the middle.
When they were on the board at 7 the other night, is that who you wanted, or did you also feel the same way about Caleb Downs?
No, I felt like for this team, I love Caleb. Obviously, Caleb is probably, I think Jeremiah Love and Caleb Downs are just the pure, just two bestest football players. Just great football players. But the upside for Sonny is where I think the biggest need for us was. Now, Caleb would have been a great option, but Sonny he's just a freak, man. Him and Arvell are just different animals, man. I don't even know how to explain it until you see him in person. They're pretty.
Yeah. By the way, just out of curiosity, because when we talk a lot of college football and players. Did you like Mansour Delane at the corner from LSU, who the Chiefs traded up for and took one pick ahead of Washington taking Styles?
I remember Mansfield from being in the area. Give a shout out to Bishop Spalding, because I remember just, the kid being in the area and seeing his name and just being around, the high school sports and trying to keep track of guys. I like his game. Did I think the Chiefs should have jumped up to 6? I didn't see that coming. I'm happy for the kid. But it all comes down to the team's need. But again, another day one starter, a guy who could fill a big need for that team, and they felt like somebody else would have got him. I wouldn't have been shocked if they wouldn't have shocked me at the Washington if he was still there, if there was some thought around getting him, because obviously can't get enough corners. But Sonny was my favorite choice.
We're talking to Sean Springs. So were there players that just going into this thing you really loved, and now you know where they've gone and you'll be watching them closely? I mean, you mentioned Love, you mentioned Styles, you Downs in terms of being a super safe pick. He and Love together. Yep. Give me some other players that you were a big fan of and you think are going to make really good pros.
Well, I think the guy that's off the charts, that's kind of scary, and people can talk about injuries and whatever, but that Jordan Tyson could be special. Yeah. Now, he is one of those guys you look up and you scratch your head like, man, did the Saints just draft Jamar Chase? He's that type of talent. He is a guy for me that I was just like, ooh, now he could be a problem in the NFL. Another guy for me that's interesting, and not just because he's a Buckeye, but Carnell at 4 was a little shock, right? Not that I think that Carnell can play. I think Carnell was the best pure route runner in the draft, with Antonio Williams, and so happened who we drafted being number 2. But I thought Carnell was the best pure Keenan Allen type receiver. He's gonna be a pro for a long time. I thought you could have got him probably at 8 or 9, where Jordan Tyson went to. But I think he's going to be very, very productive, and I'll be watching his career, and that'll be good. And obviously Caleb, right? I mean, he's happy to go to Dallas, but I thought he should have been a top 10 pick maybe. And you just got to watch his career. I'm interested in see how all these versatile Buckeyes. Arvell is very versatile. Arvell can play at the line of scrimmage, or he can play as a will linebacker for the Giants. You got Sonny who can blitz, who can play in the middle of Mike, but he also can play will, and he can blitz and do different things, and he's versatile. And then you got Caleb, who's that guy who can play nickel, safety, strong safety, free safety, And it's going to be interesting to see the development and how each team use these talented individuals, man. It's going to be fun to watch.
That was interesting, the Jamar Chase comp for Jordan Tyson. I didn't hear that one. I've seen, some Pickens comps to him. I mean, hands catcher, great hands, the whole thing, explosive. I've seen the OBJ, comp. I have not. It's hard to comp anybody to Jamar Chase. So that is a real high compliment of Tyson. And when you talked about Tate, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, but when you look at Jordan Tyson, look at how he come out. See, I judge receivers how they separate and how they come out their break,
right,
and just run after the catch. Like one of the things that Jamar Chase doesn't, you see him catching the ball and make a few people miss, and Jordan Tyson can do that. But what you don't really see is how fast he accelerates out of the top of his routes and his breaks, and that's what gets him open. Even on double teams, he'll cut across the safety space and he'll just come back to the ball. And Jordan Tyson has that little bit of it factor. Like if you're a corner or a person who has to study receivers, you guys might be like, oh, he's cool, blah, blah, blah. And then me, I'll be like, all right, that guy's scary. Because if he catch the ball, he got that little wood. Like he got a little something that I see that I'll be like, all right, I know why he's dangerous, right? Carnell, I'll be like, oh, he's a great receiver. He's gonna make the tough catches on me. He getting out here, route me up. He's gonna play great in zone. He's gonna find the spots. He's gonna be a real good receiver. Jordan Tyson is the type of guy to pull your hamstring and make you look bad.
Yeah.
I'm telling you from a corner's perspective.
Yeah. So
right?
you said about Antonio Williams, Washington's 3rd round pick, their 2nd pick in the draft, the wide receiver from Clemson, that next to Carnell Tate, he was the next best route runner in the draft among the receivers. So you really are a fan of Antonio Williams. Give me all the reasons why. in addition to that one?
One, you know, I just watch Clemson, right? You know, obviously Clemson, we see him a lot in the ACC, and I remember him being a freshman, and I just remember him being a freshman All-American and killing. So you knew who he was, right? Like, it wasn't like he was just a guy on the team and you didn't know. Every time I turned on the tape, he made a play or two, and what I liked about him is, not only did he make a plays outside, but, you know, a lot of times the young receivers and guys, they're afraid to get in that mix on the inside. Right? So if you look at him, I think he's a perfect slot guy for the NFL. I think on a highway outside, even though he's smooth and he can make tough catches, there's some 6'2" long corners that, you know, may give him trouble because it's just, I don't know how pure speed he has on the outside, but the inside, I think he's going to be excellent. He's a little undersized. He's probably like about 5'11", but he's tough. He makes great catches. He catching traffic. A little bit of probably an upgrade from like Jaden Lane, who people may say, well, we had Jaden last year, but, you know, I think Jaden proved himself as a special teams guy and stuff like that. But I think Williams will be an upgrade on the inside. That's my personal opinion. But his crispness of his routes, how he gets open, doesn't seem super fast, but people can't really like get their hands on him. Right. He can give them wiggle, and he knows how to get leverage on defensive back. So I like that about him.
By the way, when you have somebody in the slot, I mean, Amon-Ra, you know, just thinking about the best sort of inside receivers in the league, is it a much harder cover as a corner covering somebody who's great inside versus somebody who's great outside?
With different challenges, right? Usually on a guy on the outside, if you get a guy on the outside, the reason why he can play X is because he can get down the field, he can win one-on-ones, he's probably nasty, right? Like, in the sense that he probably has something that that you fear. You think about any great X, most of them can fly. They can get down the field. Or they're 6'3", and they can make T. Higgins, you know, Pickens. You know, you just think about those type of guys.
Yep.
So they pose different challenges. And then when you're on the inside, it's different because usually the guys on the inside, there's so many other things that make them good. Like, they know where to sit down, or the break part, or they give you a little wiggle at the top, or they make you think you're going inside it, and they put their foot in the ground and pivot back out. Wes Walker, right? Yeah. Right. They make you think Julian Edelman, you know, they make you think, you know, you think Amon St. Brown, like you think he'll act like he's killing, and all of a sudden he explode and catch over the middle. So those guys are a little more crafty. The best I played when I was in the league happens to be, you know, one of our coaches, Bobby Ingram, was my teammate in Seattle. He was so crafty and good on the inside. At Penn State, he was outside, but in the league, he made his living killing guys on the inside. So it's a different cover in a sense that you have to know where your help is, because he might run you off a tight end pick. He might go in motion to the other side, change your leverage. You got to make sure. So it's a little different in a sense from a defensive back standpoint of view. You have to study more, know where your help is, know where all the leverage is, and there's a lot more involved when you play in a nickel.
Were there other receivers night 2 and day 3, knowing that Washington's got a need? And I'll ask you about Ayuk here in a moment. But were there other receivers in addition to Williams that you really liked?
I just thought it was a deep class overall. I mean, I felt like I didn't have any guy that I'd narrowed down or pointed out. I mean, you know, there was the big guys like Makai Lemon, and you know, there were some guys that you knew would go early, and they were just good players. I felt like this class of receivers, there's gonna be a lot of guys who are gonna start. You know, maybe 10, you know, 10 of these guys, right? And, you know, but I knew the top 4 or 5 guys. It's going to be interesting to see how the kid from USC progresses, right? I think he's a great player. I think he'd be strong and solid. So
you're talking about Makai Lemon.
Makai Lemon, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So what else about their draft? Do you have any opinions on anybody that was taken? Yeah. Go ahead. Who do you like? What did you like about who they picked?
I like the whole draft, right? Obviously, you know, it felt like they got the best players in. They fill some needs. Joshua Joseph, from Tennessee. Obviously, he's 6'3", 240, about the same size as Sonny, but you're talking about a guy who runs T stunts. He's athletic, man. Like, he's fast. We always talk. I think we were on the show last year, Kevin. We talked about at times the defense gave up big plays and it kind of looks older and kind of looked like we didn't have the speed.
Yeah.
I think that, I think that edge and that flexibility, you start to see those kind of body types, right? 6'3", 240,
Yeah.
athletic, Oh, then you got, you just added him with, all the rest of the talent, the guys we have. But so I like Joshua. How about Katron Allen, man? That's an interesting pick, man. Very productive kid out of Penn State, right? Like, and you've seen him. We all seen him play. Penn State's on TV all the time here. You're talking about a guy all-time leading rusher at Penn State, so you're scratching your head. Like, there's two questions I have. Like, how much mileage did he have? But then I was like, well, he split time. And then
he split time with Singleton, number 10.
He split time with Singleton. And then the other thing I thought about, I was just like, damn, he's productive in the Big Ten. Like, that's no joke, man, to be like considered like one of the better running backs rushers out of Penn State. And so the moment is not too big because he didn't play against Ohio State, Michigan, or whatever. And you talk about a big back in our room. I could shake some things up, meaning like I wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden I wouldn't be shocked if all of a sudden this kid is good. We won't be like, oh, he moved the chains and he did great in preseason and looked good in camp. Duh, he went to Penn State and led, all-time leading rusher and played in the Big Ten. He's not sorry. And I don't know if
I love that. He's not sorry. No, here were his last 3 games last year. You ready? Against Michigan State on the road, 25 carries, 181 yards, 2 touchdowns. Against Nebraska and Happy Valley, 25 carries, 160 yards, 2 touchdowns. Season finale at Rutgers, 22 carries, 226 yards, and a touchdown. The dude ran for nearly 600 yards in 3 games. I mean, so, but to your point, and I should have pointed this out, because he's been playing since he was a freshman. He's had a lot of carries. Singleton was the other back. He was number 13. He was more of the inside, power back. But I liked his burst. Yeah, I mean, anybody that watched a lot of college football knew they had 2 backs that were really good and probably had a chance. And, So we're talking to Sean Springs. Overall, like, they were so bad. We talked at the end of the season, I'm pretty sure. They were so bad on defense last year. So with some of the players they added, in free agency, Owe, Chenal, Chason, Cross, I mean, I think, I don't know how it'll work out. Scheme fit, all those things. Health is obviously a big deal. Look at last year. But, man, they addressed needs with a lot of players, and they got younger and faster. What did you, of all the players they've added, and I'm looking at just the depth chart right now, literally they could have added 7 new defensive starters for week 1 next year. 7 is a possibility, with Kinlaw, Payne, and then Amos and Sandra still being the other 4. Well, I guess 6, because you're going to probably start Will Harris at safety, but Nick Cross might be the other one. But what have you liked about their offseason overall?
Just that. I mean, we talked at the end of the season, and shout out to Bobby. He's a Hall of Famer. I think Bobby was great and felt the need for us, but at times I think Bobby had challenges in the coverage, in big games, or getting there. I felt like Frankie had a solid year, but I think when guys are hurt, like Armstrong, and guys in front are hurt, and Frankie now he's the focus of having to take on the coverage being slid his way, and people kind of like identify him as a blitzer, even though him and Bobby did a great job together. I think he will be better now just with the guys we brought up front. And now you're adding tremendous speed down the middle of the field. And for those who don't know, if you're strong down the middle of the field, which we kind of addressed the D-line with Kinlaw, and we got Payne this year, but now you add a Sonny, and hopefully Will Harris is back. The kind of that triangle, that nickel, and down the middle of the field. But, man, we got younger and faster, and I think the biggest thing that people don't really, speed is important, and being speed makes up for a lot of mistakes. And I felt like a couple of times that we weren't fast enough, and we got punished with the explosive plays. I think it was a Chicago game where I was like, wow, these guys are just running passes. I distinctly remember a game when I was just like, wow. I don't know if it was Detroit or Chicago, but I just remember that feeling like, man, we not even on the same playing field as these guys. These guys.
The Detroit game, no one was even at times within 3 or 4 yards of a receiver on an underneath route where it's usually more congested.
Yeah, you're right. And maybe that was the game, and I just remember feeling like, okay, we're not fast. Yeah. Right, like, and when you add now that's totally different when you add a 4-4 guy, Sonny, and Will Harris is healthy. He can play in the box, and it's just I felt like we got younger and faster.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot to be said about the coordinator change, and we don't have to repeat all that drama from last year. But there's a lot to be said about when I put speed on the field, it makes up for a lot of mistakes.
They didn't take a corner, and there was a thought that they would take a corner. But I remember, even going back to last summer, you're like, I know what a corner at this level looks like, and Trey Amos is an NFL corner. So you feel good about him. What about the rest of it? Sandra still, they added this guy, Amik Robertson. So at corner, how do you feel about what they'll put on the field, hopefully week 1, if everybody's healthy?
Well, first of all, sometimes in the secondary, you always need a guy, even if you got great players, you always need a guy that's just a dog and a guy who's that leader.
Yeah.
And I feel like we just added one in Malik Robinson at that nickel or corner. He can play inside or outside, because if you think 2 years ago when we played in the playoffs, he was a baller. Everybody else, I don't know, but Malik Robinson is a baller. He's a dog. He's a competitor. His size doesn't matter because his heart is big, so I love that about him. Another thing that's interesting, I think, that people that showed up last year was one of the bright spots with all the injuries. I don't think people realize how good Jeremy Reeves played last year.
He played great.
Coming in as a starter. I don't think people really realize, because he's overlooked, because rightfully so, he's an all-pro special teams guy.
Yeah.
But, man, I thought last year when I saw Revo, obviously he was rewarded with a contract. When I saw Revo playing and the way he was smacking people and the way he was coming downhill, I was like, okay, we got to rethink him. I don't know if we put him back on he might have to start. I don't know. That guy got to be on the field. Because last year, when everything else was bad, one thing that continually showed up for me was Revo. So you got now another dog. So now you got some dogs. I think Mikey will play better. I think Mikey last year at times played great. Still has some picks and stuff, but at times they were a little. He was close, but not making the plays that I think he should have progressed to year 2. I think he will in year 3, only because he getting better and you learn. First year you come in, you play. The second year, you might have a little bit of like flat, and then third year you should be better because you just get smarter and more comfortable and better. Amos is all pro. I'm not deviating from that. The kid is legit. He's going to have to be legit with the way the conference is drafting receivers. Yeah. But I love that kid, and I think that the makeup of this defense now is fast and young, so it feels different. It feels confident when you're a corner. You got linebackers coming out of the stack that can run. You got guys now that, if they're healthy, we went and got some money. We spent some money on some guys who can get to the pass rusher. Now, Devon Miller was bad, but I'm talking about a guy who 3 years ago at Baltimore, we'd have been like, hey, man, this kid is a problem.
And then they wanted to move on from him, but then he played great in L.A., so we'll see. I got 30 seconds. I just want to get your thoughts on Ayuk, because I think everybody believes he will eventually be a Washington wide receiver. Are you into that or not?
I like it. I mean, okay. I like Brandon on the outside. We got the young boy, Antonio Williams on the inside. You got Terry, and then we got brought a couple of guys back.
Yeah,
the Army. So I'm excited. Okay.
Thanks for doing this as always. Hope you're well.
Oh man, all good, brother.
30 years ago. Next year we'll celebrate 30 years ago when you were drafted at number 3 overall.
Yeah, we gotta look at all the over the next 30 years, over the last 30 years, all the number 3 picks.
Yeah, we can do that. We did that actually with number 10 last week. It doesn't turn out really well over the last 20 years. About 75% of them aren't very good, and the other 25% of those that are good, they're with teams that didn't draft them. It's crazy because this draft really is, more miss than hit usually. All right, I got to run.
That's
Thanks.
Right. All right,
talk to you. Sean Springs, everybody. Our Odyssey Sports Draft coverage presented nationally by Bet365, where winning is everything. Download the Bet365 app and lock in your picks before the game begins. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in select states only. And draft coverage is also brought to you by, here on the Team 980, Liberty Mutual Insurance. Only pay for what you need. Steve Suter, who is a former college football punt returner at the University of Maryland. He's one of the greatest punt returners in college football history. He did film breakdown for us all season long after games. And by midweek, he would have sort of grades for the top three, bottom three. Really good at doing it. So I asked him to look at the picks post-haste, not in advance. And he broke down all 22s of some of the players they selected. You'll hear what he said about some of the picks post round one tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of this week. But this was Steve talking about Sonny Styles from over the weekend. Joining me right now is Steve Suter. Steve was doing film breakdown for us all season long. If this is the first time you're hearing Steve, Steve was one of the greatest punt returners in the history of college football, still holds a lot of punt return records, ACC records, NCAA records, and he calls games with Johnny Holiday on the Maryland Football Radio Network. And he is here with me today to talk about Sonny Styles. So you've looked at the film, you've broken it down. By the way, before we get to Styles, real quickly, did you, I know that you weren't following the draft in a real meaningful way, but in watching last night, did you have a player that you hoped Washington got, or you thought Washington fans should hope to get?
You know what? I kind of did. And then, our interactions all season, last season, and doing the podcast, it has brought me back a little bit to paying attention. I'm not going to say I'm not going to call myself a Commanders fan again yet, but I am paying attention because it makes sense for me to pay attention. So with saying that, I was actually rooting for Sonny to be there at 7 for the Commanders. And I say that because wide receivers are hit and miss. Corners are hit and miss. And I thought Sonny was maybe the only guy in the draft, with exception to Caleb Downs, that were not hit or miss. I think those two players were plug and play starters day one. And then defensively, the Commanders need a lot of help. So I was hoping that Sonny was there for him because you don't even have to think about it. And when the Chiefs made that move to jump in front of them to take the corner, I was actually not, I wouldn't say excited, but I was almost relieved in a sense where Peters doesn't have to make a gamble here and go with the corner that may be good, may not be good. You take Sonny, it's a no-brainer, and the anxiety's not even there. So I think it worked out great for Washington. I think they hit a home run with Sonny, and I think it was a good night for him.
Styles and Downs, you thought were the two players that are totally plug and play in this draft. So tell us what you got on Sonny Styles.
Yeah, I think Sonny's just I'm a big tweener guy. I really like tweeners where they don't work out in a single position and then they migrate to another one where maybe the ideal size and traditional, what you would call that type of position, doesn't work out. I'm a big fan of this guy. I see it work out a lot. And so with Sonny Styles coming from a safety, hey, maybe I'm not as fast or as quick as I should be to be a safety, or my body, I'm growing into my body and I can't stop putting on muscle as we hit the weight room. Now I'm 220, now I'm 230, now I'm 240. What are we going to do here? Hey, well, you're a tweener. Let's move to linebacker. And he just shows me a lot of attributes that I think are very versatile at the linebacker position. And I think he's going to be just a really good player. And maybe, I don't want to say he's going to be a 100 tackle guy, but he's going to lead the defense, I think, in tackles, because he's just going to be everywhere and you don't have to hide him. And he can play on third down. You can play in coverage because you were a safety. You see that in his highlights that I've watched. He's very comfortable in space with hook zone curls, flats. He's going to be able to see. There's hidden things within linebackers position, and every position is complementary, right? You go D-line to linebacker to secondary. They all complement each other. But what you're not going to see on a stat sheet is Sonny Styles making a tackle on 2nd and 8, and now it's 3rd and 7 because he made the tackle for a 1-yard gain, and now it's not 3rd and 3. So you're putting yourself in obvious passing situations so defensive coordinators can be more prepared. All that stuff just compounds and builds on each other. You're not going to see in the stat sheet, but he's going to be helping that aspect of Washington's defense. I think he's sideline to sideline. I think he's got good instincts. I will say this. Maybe not. I don't want to call it a red flag, but I want to see him take on more lead zone guards because he's going to have to do that if he's going to play inside. And I think he can play everywhere. He started at will at Ohio State, and I think that's probably. I mean, he's kind of a tweener there too. Like I don't think he's not a Bobby Wagner. I'm a middle linebacker. That's all I do because he can do more things. But he's going to have to learn how to take on a 320-pound guard in the NFL in an A gap and not try to always dodge the block, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You have to, at some times, take on that 320 guard in A gap because you have other players responsible for these sides next to you, and you can't avoid the block because essentially you might as well just got pancaked. If you avoid the block and you don't make the play, you just open up the hole. So I would like to see more of that. His ability to take on those lead blocks and then shed them or not shed them, but at least you got to at least stone them at the point of attack where they don't have a two-way go. So that would be my only red flag. But he's going to make so many plays out in space and going sideline to sideline, and he's going to have instincts to shoot run gaps on tosses and outside zones. That's going to make up for it, and he's going to learn that because they're going to go. There's going to be. I can almost guarantee there's going to be a couple times he tries to avoid a block and it causes a problem versus taking it on, let somebody else make the tackle. And they're going to correct it on film. And they're going to say, Sonny, man, I know you're trying to make a play here, but you got to take on this block and let somebody else make the play because instead of a 4-yard gain, now it's a 14-yard gain.
Do you see more safety instincts or linebacker instincts with him?
I would say they grew on me, actually. I think he's still learning the position. I think he was more safety mindset as he started. If you watch the Texas film, you're seeing more of a safety mindset in the box, and you can't have that.
Right.
But then towards the end of the season, Miami, Indiana, those games at the end of the year, you could see he was a different player just in one season. So I think he's still learning and growing into being a linebacker, and it's a mentality thing. It's not skill-wise. It's just him learning what a linebacker needs to do in each situation and not what a safety would do in each situation. So I think he's learning that. And from everything I've read and heard, and I'm sure you have more intel on him than I do, but strong character guy, wants to
smart,
be fun.
the whole thing. Yeah.
So it's only going to get better. It's only going to get better for him.
Steve, what is the difference between a safety coming down and playing in the box and a linebacker who just starts in the box?
Well, I think it goes back to taking on blocks like I was talking about earlier. A safety, I don't want to say 9 times out of 10, but I'll say 6 times out of 10, you're not accounted for in the blocking scheme. So I think the safety gets more freedom when he comes down the box to gamble. He can use his instincts and try to avoid blocks to try to make a play. And then it's a highlight. You're like, oh my gosh, look. And I'll use Caleb Downs, for example, because we're talking safeties in Ohio State. Oh, look, Caleb Downs just made this great play in the box, and he came down and he's a run support guy, and he's impacting the game that way. But offensively, you can't really account for a safety coming down in the box because NFL defenses are disguising it. So you're going to have a 2 shell. They're going to be showing 2 deep. You're not accounting for them. They're going to roll to it late because they don't want you to prepare for it. And now the safety is kind of unaccounted for. Where at linebacker, you are accounted for in every run game. So he needs to know he's accounted for. Yeah, he needs to be, and going back to sometimes you can't be the one making the tackle. You have to take on the block to allow somebody else to make the tackle. So those are those sacrifice plays when you become a team guy. Like, dude, Sonny is the best. He's a team guy. We love him in the locker room because he's doing all the right things and he's allowing other players to make plays. Not saying he's not going to make plays because he is, but that would be the difference between the 2 positions.
Yeah, one of the things I'm kind of hearing from you, and I'm going to use 2 names in this conversation, part of the conversation. There's been a lot of comps of Sonny Styles to Fred Warner in San Francisco, and Adam Peters was in San Francisco, and Fred Warner is a special player at that position. But Kyle Hamilton is a special player too, as an in-the-box safety, really is a safety anywhere on the field. And I'm wondering if, like, you kind of see Sonny Styles right now, he's heavier than Kyle Hamilton. I mean, he's grown into this body. He was 215, and now he's 235, 240, or whatever it is. But if that he's going to play more like Kyle Hamilton, but grow into becoming more like Fred Warner. I mean, those are two, elite examples. But that's what I was thinking about in listening. Yeah, that's what I was thinking about in listening to you. Is he's got, he's a bit of Kyle Hamilton maybe today, playing linebacker, not safety, but in the box, and he'll eventually, hopefully grow into Fred Warner.
Yeah, that would be best case scenario for Washington for sure.
But do you know what I'm saying? Like, maybe stylistically, he's closer to Kyle Hamilton right now as a player.
Yeah, I would. Yes. Sure. I'll go with that. I'll get on board with that. He would. I don't want to say scare me or make me nervous, but I don't want him one-on-one covering a slot receiver.
Sure.
In man coverage. Not right away, anyway.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to prove to me you can do that. I wouldn't have an issue with Kyle doing that right now at any point. I don't see Sonny getting on the line of scrimmage and jamming or even attempting to try to jam a receiver. So that type of scenario would not or should not happen. You would try to avoid that in a defensive scheme where he is in charge of a slot receiver. I think he's going to have where he's going to dominate in coverage is man coverage on most of the running backs in the league. I'll say most, right? Bijan probably still give him fits like anybody would, or Gibbs too. But I think he's going to have the edge in pass coverage on anybody, most running backs in the NFL when he's locked up man coverage. And that you could not say last year with Wagner.
No.
It was a disadvantage. So you're already on third down in a better position at linebacker right away with Sonny. The X factor is in the run game and straight at him. I have no concerns with runs going away or cutback runs, things of that nature, where he can use his athletic ability and speed and avoid blocks in those situations. It's the ones that are going to be coming right at him. I would like to watch early on.
Yeah, so that is the one concern you have, and everything else is positive. Now, you've talked about him in man coverage. Part of me just kind of envisions with his athleticism and quickness, he's going to be really good in zone coverage too, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Those are most of his highlights in college.
Yeah.
Him in zone coverage, in space, and not necessarily, I'm not saying he's making plays, but he's not a liability. That's the best way to put it. And that's why I think it's such a good pick, because he's so consistent. He's not going to blow coverage. If he's responsible for a hook down to a flat, he's going to play the hook down to the flat. And he's going to take away the 10-yard hook, and then he's going to be able to close on the swing pass that the quarterback dumps off because he had to go to his third read because nobody's open. And then he's going to close on that, and it's going to be a 3-yard gain versus a 12-yard first down because Wagner couldn't get over there, or Wagner got over there and got shook, or any linebacker for that example. I think he's comfortable in space. And those things, like, again, that's not a stat thing. You're not going to see it. But I'm going to see it while I'm watching film. I'm like, damn, Sonny just took away the hook, and then he broke on the flat swing, and it's only a 3-yard gain, and it's 3rd and 8.
Right.
And those types of things are just going to be invaluable, and they're going to build and build. And he's going to, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but he could be a Pro Bowl type linebacker.
Is he going to be a good pass rusher? Because I think the Durante Jones defense is a Brian Flores defense, and people are coming from everywhere. And you never know where they're, you saw what it was with, 8 guys on the line of scrimmage pre-snap, and nobody knows what's going on. Will he be a good pass rusher?
Well, I think you're answering your own question there because of the scheme. He's going to be good because you're not going to know who's coming. And that puts an offense on their heels. That puts linemen on their heels. And so it's going to give them an advantage right off the bat. So if he has a weakness as a pass rusher, he's going to have the benefit of having some schematic advantage is. And then you can learn to become better at it if that's a weakness of his. We don't see much of that from Ohio State. He didn't do it much. But with the athletic ability and the speed and his size, that is, I think, an advantage when you're pass rushing sometimes, it's speed versus power. I don't see how that can't be an advantage for him. But I think it's, again, goes to the home run that Washington hit, because he doesn't have to do that all the time, but he could do that. And then you can do some trickery. You could have Louvu on the line of scrimmage. You could have him off the ball, and then you have Sonny come on the blitz. You drop Louvu back into the hook curl. You can mix and match that. And it's just, I think it's a really good situation for him to be in. If I'm a defensive coordinator, everybody kept talking about the versatility and things of that nature with the Giants. Remember when the Giants picked and they're like, oh my God, they got Reese and they got all these guys and Carter and all this. This defensive coordinator is looking at his chops. I think Washington guys in the same boat. Now, he doesn't have the back end support in the secondary, but I think he's got to be hype about the options that he has now at the linebacker level to do some different things. That's going to help the secondary.
Steve Suter, film breakdown of Sonny Styles. He'll do the other players, and we'll have that for you during the course of the week. Ben Standig next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Ben is with us. You should be a subscriber to his Substack. It's easy to do. Just go to @BenStandig and link to his Substack column. He did a great job covering the draft pre and post, and will continue to do that throughout the summer leading into the games. Before we get to any specific thoughts you may have on the draft, but it's not exclusive of thoughts on the draft, give me right now your top 3 favorite moves of the offseason for them.
Oh, God. So including free agency
Everything.
and all
Coaches,
that stuff?
extensions, free agent additions, etc.
Well, okay, I guess this is a broad one, and you've mentioned this before. Sometimes it's like when we are watching things, do they see the world the same way we do? And I think they recognize that they had to get younger faster, and they did so in a really aggressive way. So I know that encompasses a lot of
that's not one move, but I'll allow it.
Well, yeah, I mean, they
younger and faster on defense, which was absolutely a priority. But it's not one move. It was you just took a lot of moves and put them together. But I'm going to allow it. So what's number 2?
I liked the Nick Cross signing. It was a pretty decent contract for a guy that's got all the things that they're looking for. He's got good speed. He's really aggressive in the run defense. These are 2 areas that they needed help in. I thought they still could maybe go for some safety help in the draft. They didn't, obviously, but I think adding a guy like that is a lower key move than some of the other ones. But I thought that one was a pretty good one for sure. And then I don't know. I'll just go with Sonny Styles. I mean, obviously it's a little bit obvious, but again, in the idea of where they needed to go to take this thing up a notch or 2. I mean, you couldn't have drawn it up better than a guy who is 6'4", 244, runs a 4.4 40 faster than a lot of the big time receivers we discussed. I don't know that he'll be the next great linebacker. We'll see. But in terms of where they were as a team, what was available to them, I know a lot of people are like, take a receiver and all that. And, I wasn't necessarily on board with that at 7, but I think taking a guy like that, it just makes so much sense for where they are. So maybe that's a little too obvious, but that stands out.
Yeah, I just thought of, nothing was better for their offseason than Jaden playing wide receiver in a flag football game. Of course, I'm being sarcastic, but the younger and faster on defense and the emphasis on what their weakness was, you're not always convinced that the team is going to see it the same way the fans do, and we're fans. But their belief about last year and where they needed to improve clearly aligned with anybody that watched the team. They were bad on defense, and yes, they were injured on defense, but they needed an overhaul of talent that had to be, certainly younger, preferably, but a lot more athletic, faster, better tackling, just better players. And they actually do have on paper better players. You're never, for sure you can't be convinced about whether or not the scheme is the right scheme, the fit, because we don't even know a lot about that, at this point with a new defensive coordinator. But, that's fine as your number 1. For me, specific to moves, I think my favorite move is signing Chigakonkwo. I think that if you weren't going to bring Ertz back off that serious injury, and even if you did, the chances of getting what you had in 24 are probably diminished. I think it's a really important position that they have somebody who can separate and be a big target at that spot for their young quarterback, even with the offensive scheme change. And I'm just a big fan of the player in watching him in the NFL, going back to college. And I think he's untapped and will ascend to upper level of pass catching tight ends in the league now that he's actually playing on a team with a quarterback, which he really did not have in his years in Tennessee. I would say getting the Tunsil extension done immediately almost is a really good thing for them, in part because of how last summer went and the focus of last summer with Terry's extension. We don't have any of that to deal with. We will have an Ayuk watch to deal with. And then the number 3 is, even though I would have preferred personally Reuben Bain, I understand and said before the draft, I know that there's a chance he's going to drop because of the short arm analytic, people. And this organization has an R&D department and an analytics department that probably said his arms are too short. But I like Styles. I like the player. It's the perfect fit, it would seem, for a need that they desperately had. How often did we have conversations since the end of the season about who's going to be that guy defensively? And maybe he won't be ready week 1 as a rookie. That's not unusual that a rookie player isn't ready week 1, but I like that particular player. There are others, but those would be my top 3.
Yeah, well, those make a lot of sense. What I was thinking about while we were discussing it, and I'm not saying that the replacement is necessarily, we'll see what happens. I think moving on from Cliff Kingsbury, I'm not saying it's one of my top 3, but I appreciate the conviction that Dan Quinn decided to do this, because obviously last year a lot of what went wrong, we understand the injuries across the board, Jaden Daniels on down, but there were a lot of wait, what's going on here? Why are we getting away from the run game? Just certain aspects of it. It just felt like it was not, and it was the question that I asked them at the end of the year. If this is such the offense, how come nobody else in the league is remotely veering towards it? And it's not to say that you should be groupthink and follow the herd, but it is to say, well, wait a minute, are we sure this makes sense? And then obviously they've changed it. Now, again, I don't know if David Blau is the right guy. We'll see, but I appreciate at least the decision to go that way, because it would have been easy to say, nah, we're good. Look what we did in 2024. And they decided, nah, we're going to make a change here.
Look, that's, that it's a ballsy decision because of what they did in 24 and how easily you could point to last year and say, well, when your starting quarterback only plays 4 out of 17 games start to finish, you're doomed. And they actually, given what they had on the field, in many ways overachieved offensively. And I think the running attack is such an interesting thing, because watching the team, I felt like they should have run the ball more too. But they were the 4th leading rush offense in the NFL, and they had the 9 most rushing attempts in the NFL. And some of the teams in front of them had just as many quarterback rushes as they did. So, but I understand what you're saying. They were convicted about this. You could easily make the case to bring Cliff back. I think you could have easily made that case. Based on performance and based on the results last year with what he was working with. But they were convicted and they made that move. And I like the style of offense they're moving towards with the quarterback they have. All right. So you did, before the draft, I think last week, early in the week, we talked about, you doing, I forget how many mock drafts you took to create a consensus. But, Warren Sharp had the Arif Hassan or the Ben Robinson or whatever it was, and Washington was clearly the team that got the most value for their picks, based on, just want to repeat it for everybody else, not you, Ben, but, the consensus of all these mock drafts, the players Washington took, they got much lower than the pick that they were supposed to go at. So how do you feel about, discussing the draft right after the draft? I guess that's one way to do it, the way that you were planning on doing it last week and the way I just discussed it.
Look, obviously you have, I know people say you can't judge the draft for a few years. Okay, cool. But we can't just not talk about it until then. So we'll just have to wait and see for sure. So certainly taking the public information that's out there in terms of how various evaluators or people or sites saw the draft and whatever conclusions that they came up with, and then based on that, did Washington or did any team reach? Did they get a guy that that fell for some reason? And that's how you look at it. And like you said, Warren Sharp's analysis has Washington as got the best value, and I saw some other ones I think that had similar type stories with Washington ranked pretty high. The reason, though, when I did my own consensus big board was because precisely why I don't really give a crap most of these big consensus boards, because I only took like 6 boards. I took like 4 of the ones of the most prominent people, your McShays, your Daniel Jeremiahs, et cetera, as well as like PFF, and use those, because when you're telling me you took over like 100, that's a brag. That doesn't mean anything. Who the hell are the people that you're getting these things from? You can't tell me that, like, you can't tell me that starting today, going ahead to 2027, if you could tell that, say, everybody who's going to put up a big board, you have to live in isolation for the next 9 months. All you can do is watch games and watch tape. That's it. I guarantee these lists would not be close to accurate.
No, herd mentality. Yep.
Yeah, the Daniel Jeremiahs and McShay, like, they start the baseline. I went back and looked last year just for the hell of it at the way too early mock
it's
draft.
A joke. It's a joke. Arch Manning, Cade Klubnik, Garrett Nussmeier. Yeah.
Yeah, but not only that, like, I looked at one of the ESPN writers and I looked at PFF, and I'm assuming that neither one of them looked at the other one before they put theirs out. Of the 32 picks, I forget the fact that they missed, Klubnik was worse. Oh, that can happen. But of the 32 picks, I think 21 were the same players. That's insane. You're telling me out of hundreds of players that you could possibly pick from, you landed on the same 21? And it's not like all 21 ended up being first-round picks or second-round picks or third-round picks. That is the definition of herd mentality, even if you're not looking at what the other people are doing. So, look, I think, like, so, for example, Joshua Joseph is the big one for Washington, right? He was a guy that was being projected 3rd round, 4th round, top 100 range.
He's a playmaker, yeah.
At 147, he goes. Okay, so that's like, wow. I guess Washington got a steal, and maybe they did. I mean, there's a lot to like about the kid. He's athletic, he's fast, he's got a really good burst off the line of scrimmage. The production wasn't necessarily there in college. I think there were some maturity issues along the way that maybe led to his drop in the draft, but it sounds like he improved in that range over time as well. But here's a consensus board I think people should consider. It's called the NFL draft. And the consensus of the league was he wasn't worthy of being picked until Washington decided, okay, we're good to go. So they may have gotten a great value. I had him as a guy that I thought made some sense, but I don't.
Right. The consensus board that you really need, which would never be available, would be the consensus of the 32 NFL team boards. Which may look completely different. I'm with you. Look, you said, it's impossible. It is impossible to grade a draft. I refuse and have for years to do grades or thumbs up, thumbs downs, or winners and losers. This is, like you said, the all way too early last year doesn't even resemble what we got. This year's all way too early won't resemble. Fernando Mendoza or Ty Simpson weren't even mentioned in all way too early's last year.
Sonny Styles was not listed in either.
Styles wasn't. Malik Willis, you would have been laughed out of a building if you were told that he was going to be the number 1 free agent or a top 3 free agent in August or September. You would have been laughed out. These seasons are their own entities, man, and it's hard. But with that said, it's one way, I guess, that a lot of people like to look at it if they're not breaking down film themselves. Was there a player over the weekend, because we talked on Friday after night 1, was there a player, and I think I know what your answer is going to be, but I'm not going to give it to you. You can give me the answer. Was there a player that was on the board when they selected in the 3rd, 5th, 6th, 7th that you thought they were going to take that they didn't?
I presume you're going to say Ted Hurst, the receiver from
when
Georgia
he was
State.
on the board there. I liked Zachariah Branch. Hurst is a different player, obviously, because of the size. But I knew you were thinking, and I thought we're going to see Ted Hurst there because Ben's going to probably be right about this. And then they picked Antonio Williams. Not a lot of discussion about Williams leading up to Washington's draft.
Yeah, so when I was doing my various mock drafts, I would typically do them out to number 71 just to, see what would be there for Washington. And Williams was pretty much always in my mock draft ahead of Washington. I never really considered him here, though, because as I was, looking at him and studying him, it looked to me like we're talking about a slot receiver. And that's not to say that Washington is set in the slot. They definitely are not.
Right.
But, I thought the biggest issue last year was when McLaurin was hurt, they didn't have anybody else who could remotely scare the defense down the field from the outside. And so to get a guy like that, and then also, as we know, with Terry potentially going into his walk season, or not his walk season, but it's potentially his last season based on his contract, that, okay, who would be the replacement for that? Could you at least have another outside receiver? That to me was the biggest argument for taking a Carnell Tate at 7. But anyway, I was looking at guys like Hurst, a 6'4", guy who runs a 4.4, that type of receiver. They obviously went in a different direction. And, with Williams now, Adam Peters said that, hey, we don't see him as just a slot. He said that his ability to win on the outside is what was for him, for Peters, a separator from other guys at that spot. And I don't have an issue necessarily taking a slot per se, because, again, right now it's Jalen Lane and Luke McCaffrey. Otherwise, it's just more like, oh, okay, that's not what I thought they would do. And if he is more of a slot, this is the third year in a row you've taken a guy essentially for that position. That's a lot of resources for that one spot, and it hasn't been solved yet, at least not to this point. But that said, a lot of people like Williams. As a route runner, he's got good speed, good athleticism. He's not the biggest guy, which is where we'll see about him as an outside target if that really works. But there's a lot to like about the guy. It's just not what I thought they would go with.
RAS scores emphasized certainly with Joseph Williams to a certain degree. We know Styles, not as much with Katron Allen. I liked Katron Allen. I talked about him multiple times last week leading up to it. I actually preferred him to Singleton for our team because they don't have somebody like him right now. Although Rashad White is a between the tackles runner, it's going to be an interesting running back room, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, of the RAS score, we don't have to deviate from that based on their free agency and their draft. When we get to next offseason, it should be a focus for all of us in terms of trying to predict the players they'll be interested in.
Yeah, I thought Allen was an interesting pick. I mean, just to circle back to him, like you said, they didn't really have a guy that's sort of an obvious short yardage power back, and he's not like a John Riggins huge guy, but at the same point, that's his just general style is somebody that's hard to take down and can take on the short yardage stuff. And look, when we say that that's a position where you can kind of find people, I think therefore it's okay to take shots at finding people, right? I mean, Bill was really good last year. Maybe they can get somebody else who's comparable to that, or maybe even better. So I don't have a real issue with that, other than to say I was a little surprised they didn't say take a cornerback somewhere, because when you get to day 3, it really comes down to, in my opinion, is this guy making the team, right? Do we putting ourselves in a position where somebody we already think is going to make the team now maybe is getting pushed out? At cornerback right now, I would argue they only have 4 guys, right? And then after that, look, the free agency is still a thing. Like, they can go out and sign your Antonio Hamiltons of the world and guys like that, and then they'll be okay. But they only have 4 corners right now. And, the reason why Mansour Delane made some sense at 7 was because they don't necessarily have a guy who's at that top tier corner, and maybe he could be that. So I thought maybe you would add some depth there as opposed to taking another running back. But like I said, I don't have any real issue with that.
All right. So two more, and I'll let you run. The first one would be this. Of the undrafteds, who got money and who didn't? Who got a real guarantee and who didn't?
I actually don't know that one exactly. I was able to confirm a lot of the signings, but I didn't go to the next step on that front. I also didn't see like when Sam Hartman got a big deal in 2024. That was something that was pretty prominent. Plus, he was a quarterback. But yeah, I didn't see any notion of any of that happening with any of these guys at this point.
All right. Lastly, I guess now that free agency wave 1, wave 2, wave 3-ish, and the draft are over, now we're just on Brandon Ayuk watch between now and training camp, or even into training camp. Correct?
Yeah, 100%. That's the other thing with taking Antonio Williams over, say, a Ted Hurst, is that if you take Antonio Williams and Brandon Ayuk comes in, that doesn't really change anything. In fact, if Brandon Ayuk is what a lot of people hope he is. Boy, they just really upgraded their receiver room in 2 spots with these picks, whereas an outside receiver now, that's a little more confusing. But yeah, it's all about Brandon Ayuk at this point. I mean, I guess the wild card would be, it's not that he's not a wild card, but the wild card would be, is there a world where they've just been slow playing, Jawan Jennings all this time, and maybe there's something there. Doesn't seem like that. If you're going to take the big risk on Brandon Ayuk, I mean, Stephon Diggs at least played last year and was pretty good. He's sitting there. I know he's got some legal issues going on, but so that would be the one wrinkle here. But yeah, it feels like we're just waiting for San Francisco to release the guy, or come up with a trade, and then we go from there. I mean, I know some people have thrown this out before, but the fact that they just drafted another sort of slot receiver type, the idea of a trade with Luke McCaffrey going to the 49ers to reunite or to play with his brother, and Ayuk coming here, there feels like there's like some some fun in that type of a move. I'm just making that up. I have no sense that's a thing.
You can't trade for Ayuk. You can't take on that contract.
No, of course not. That's why I mean, but that's why this whole thing that makes no sense. But yes, I mean, I guess if there's a world where San Fran is saying, well, we'll pay for 95% of the whole thing, I don't know. But yes, I agree. There's no trade happening here. It's just a matter of waiting it out, and we'll see. But we've discussed this many times already. I don't get it. I mean, I get it from the perspective of Adam Peters knows him, and that Jaden Daniels knows him, and he was once one of the better receivers in the league, but hasn't played since 2024. He blew up his whole San Francisco situation. It's going to cost him millions upon millions of dollars, and that's just a lot to bring on to a situation where you're coming off a 5-win season and you need some stability. This feels like a massive, shot in the dark, and I wish, I guess they didn't feel like they needed to take it, but it seems like they may decide to do that.
All right. Thanks. Great work the last couple of weeks. We'll talk later in the week. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Kevin. Thanks, man. See you.
At Ben Standig, everybody, on X. Ben's coverage of the team continues to be outstanding. Doc's going to jump on with us in about 15 minutes to talk about the passing of Monty Coleman over the weekend. Up next, we'll shift gears and talk about some of the other things that happened in sports over the weekend, including the biggest turnaround in a half in NBA playoff history last night. Kevin Sheehan Show, Team 980 and theteam980.com. Doc Walker will join us in about 10 minutes, and he will remember his teammate, Monty Coleman, who we talked about at the beginning of the show. For those that missed it, Monty Coleman passed away over the weekend at the age of 68 years old. One of the great Redskins during their championship years, for sure. One of the most athletic players who've ever played for our franchise here. Some things we haven't talked about on the show that from over the weekend. First of all, in the NBA playoffs, in the San Antonio-Portland game yesterday, which was game 4 in a series that San Antonio led 2-1, they did get Victor Wembanyama back. He had 7 block shots, along with 27 points and 12 rebounds in the game. But at halftime, Portland had a 17-point lead. Denny Avdia going off in this game. Ended up with 26, 7 rebounds as well. I mean, they had a 17-point halftime lead. They lost by 21. The 38-point turnaround in one half is the most in NBA history. First time ever a team has trailed by 15 or more at halftime and won the game by 15 or more. They outscored Portland in the second half 73-35. That was insanity. Last night, no Kevin Durant for Houston, and the Rockets down 3-0 stayed alive, beating the Lakers 115-96. The Lakers in the game had 23 turnovers. LeBron, for the second straight game in this series, had 8 turnovers. He's got 16 turnovers himself in the last 2 games. It's an odd series because Kevin Durant now hasn't played in 3 of the 4 games. They really appear to be kind of a salty team that just doesn't really enjoy playing. They've really, Udoka, the coach for Houston, has been outwitted at every turn by J.J. Redick. The other night in game 3 in this series, Houston had a 6-point lead with the ball with 26 seconds to go in the game, with the Lakers turning their back to give up on the game at the very end of the game. But one player, Marcus Smart, just hung around and tried to defend in the backcourt, and Houston threw the ball right to him. They made a 3, got a steal, made another 3. Game went to overtime, and they won. It was the most incompetent ending to a game I've ever seen in the NBA playoffs. The Rockets are, certainly capable of beating the Lakers without Luka Doncic, without Austin Reeves. They should be 2-2 in this series. How about having, Max, a 6-point lead with the ball, 26 seconds to go in the game, and 4 of the 5 defenders on the other team are just running back, not trying to foul. In essence, they've given up. They're going to let the clock run down. And then Marcus Smart just decides to hang around, and they threw it right to him in the backcourt. You get a 3, you get a steal, another 3, and then the Lakers are winning the game in overtime. On Saturday night, game 4 between Minnesota and Denver. This was fun to watch. Ultimately, the Timberwolves won the game 112-96. They completely dominated the fourth quarter to take a 3-1 series lead. Nikola Jokic, who will go down as one of the greatest 10, 12 players in the history of the game, will certainly go down as one of the greatest 3 to 5 centers of all time. He has really struggled against Rudy Gobert in these playoffs. Minnesota is a tough team. This is old school Detroit Pistons style basketball. They are really, really physical. And at the very end of this game, a player who I fell in love with last year, the year before. This is, by the way, let me just tell you, because most of you don't know this, I'm guessing. The Minnesota-Denver NBA rivalry right now might be the best rivalry in the NBA. These two teams, the players, the coaches, they can't stand each other. And it has gotten chippy in every game. But at the end of the game, Jaden McDaniels, who's an absolute stud defensively, he did the thing that you're not supposed to do. One of those unspoken rules in sports. When the other team is not defending as the clock is winding down, you're not supposed to go in and score. You're supposed to just dribble the clock out. Well, Jaden McDaniels went in and scored with 2.6 seconds to go. Up, by the way, at the time, up by 14, with the Nuggets having turned to start to walk towards their bench. And you know who didn't like it at all? Nikola Jokic, who sprinted in McDaniel's direction, which caused, a borderline free-for-all, no punches really thrown, but both benches emptied. I don't know if there's been any, as I've been checking to see if there's any ramifications of suspensions or anything. But that series, Minnesota's probably going to win this series. Jokic just does not look like himself because Rudy Gobert's defense has been sensational. They play game five tonight in Denver. Denver's an 11.5-point favorite, and they've lost 3 straight games, and really the last 2 haven't been close. So they must be the right side tonight, Max. Lay the points with Denver tonight, 11.5. Actually, Max, don't take my advice on NBA because I gave you a pick
It worked
the other
out great
night that
so
didn't
far.
work. Yeah, not so good so far. I had Denver Thursday night. I had Houston Friday night. Good thing I'm not giving these picks out as smell test picks.
Thank God.
They're not working. NBA playoffs have been good this last week. Some really intense games. I'm telling you, I think it was right about this time last year where I just said, I don't care how young they are. I don't care that they haven't, even gotten to the conference finals yet. The Thunder are going to win the title. And I think you can safely say that the Thunder are a massive favorite right now. If they play San Antonio, it should be entertaining. I think they're better than San Antonio. I think a Boston OKC final would be a lot of fun to watch. OKC is just smothering defensively. They just have too many ways to go. Just doesn't seem like they play many close games. They're certainly not against Phoenix. We'll see what happens in the next round. And then there was this from Sean McVay. So after Thursday night, when they selected Ty Simpson at number 13, a lot of criticism of that pick, but a lot of criticism of Sean McVay on that night when they held the press conference, he and general manager Les Snead, and he looked despondent. He looked like that was the last guy he wanted his franchise to pick. Well, he explained why he sort of behaved the way he did on Saturday. Here's what he said.
There's different things, I think, always want to be mindful of, all right, how things come off, things like that. Very excited about last night, very excited about today, and couldn't be more excited about us continuing to lead together. But every decision that we make is collective and collaborative. And so for any of the questions or misunderstandings just based on my demeanor or disposition last night, I did want to get that out of the way. This is my buddy right here. All right. So that was brought to my attention because I got so many texts, and that was never my intended way to be able to come off. But sometimes I can be a little grumpy, Well,
why were you?
No, I think, there was other things that had nothing to do with that, which, that's normal life. But the main thing was, I think, I couldn't be more excited about being able to add him, but also understanding of how much I love Matthew Stafford, how respectful you want to always be to just the way things can be interpreted. And so the demeanor would have been, stoic by nature because you are excited, but by no means, it is Matthew's football team. Excited to be able to add Ty. What a blessing it is for him to be able to learn from Matthew, to be able to come into this atmosphere and environment. But whenever that time comes for him to get an opportunity to be Matthew's successor, will be on Matthew's terms. And I think that's really what the important thing was. And I didn't want that to ever be misunderstood while not minimizing the excitement for Ty, the buy-in. Les and his group really liked him. As soon as we started really studying him, there was a body of work, like I talked about, that was a good, fun evaluation, and a lot of the concepts that we would activate. Guy's a football junkie, plays with the timing and rhythm. You can see that he's a coach's son. The way his journey is a fun one that he's been through. And then to be able to add 2 players on the offensive side of the ball today with Max, obviously the depth that we have at tight end is well documented, but we plan to be able to build on some of the things.
You can bail out of this. I mean, the point that Sean McVay made and emphasized was that his demeanor was kind of about Matt Stafford and not looking like so excited that they just drafted his future replacement. Okay. I mean, they, Les Snead, when he said, this is my guy, we're in lockstep, they've done a great job together. I mean, since Sean McVay arrived in 2017. I mean, what a run he has had there. What a run the two of them have had there. And they're going to be, certainly one of the top 2 or 3 favorites to win the Super Bowl next year. Whether or not this is the right move, like somebody mentioned it this morning, they said, what if they had drafted like a corner like Trent McDuffie? Remember, they traded their number 29 overall to KC for Trent McDuffie. What if they had drafted somebody like Trent McDuffie, like one of the top 2 corners on the board at 13, and then had taken Ty Simpson at 29? No one would have had a question about it. It's that he went at that high that everybody had an issue with it. Now, there's been reporting that says that had they not taken him at 13, he wouldn't have gotten past Pittsburgh at 21. So they may have had to take him there if they were going to draft the quarterback of the future. Matt Stafford's going to be 39 this year? I don't know how many years he has left, but yeah, interesting. Ty Simpson, the future quarterback for the Rams whenever Matt Stafford retires. All right, we'll talk Monty Coleman with Doc Walker next. Monty Coleman passed away over the weekend. Too young, 68 years old. One of the greatest linebackers in franchise history, one of the great special teamers in franchise history, one of the great all-around athletes in franchise history. Part of 4 NFC championship teams, 3 Super Bowl winning teams. Doc Walker is with us to talk about his teammate and friend. I was talking to CJ early this morning, and I just said, do you remember like a play that stands out? And he said, not really. And I go, not me either. I remember he took, like Hollywood Henderson style, took a couple of kickoffs on reverses, because he was so athletic. But what I remember, it was just his athleticism and just how dependable he was. But you played with him. What are your memories?
Well, they're all the best. And Kevin, thanks for the opportunity to be on your gig. I refer to linebackers in my day as sparring partners.
For you, yeah.
Yeah, for us, tight ends with Dutch and and all of our guys, because it's a person and group that you compete against every day. And so much like boxers, I just think it's appropriate. Well, he was the guy, when I saw Sonny Skiles selected, I thought of Monty, because the things that people are saying about Sonny was Monty. You're not supposed to be that big, strong, fast, and all those things all in one, but he was. Why the draft to me is so overrated is that he was built and looked like a first-round draft pick, but he wasn't. And it's just another example of why today is my most exciting day of the football offseason for the next couple of weeks, because the UFAs are selected, undrafted free agents. So everybody with their own individual story that has got something to prove. They're not NIL people. They're people out here that are trying to make it, and they have the savage approach that I'm looking for. So all my favorite people come out of today and tomorrow. Monty was the best of all of that, just had all this talent and is such a gentle person, gentle man, that it's amazing that he had all that talent and all that in one guy. And he gave as a coach, and as a teacher, and as a husband, and as a parent, and as a friend. And it's just been very disappointing for me knowing the kind of pain and discomfort that he's been under the last decade.
Yeah.
And so he's a soldier, man. And there's 3 of them: Mel Kaufman, Rich Malott, and now Monty. All my 3 sparring partners are no longer with me. So it's really, I just think that it's all about elevating him and the love and compassion that you have for him and his family. And just so happy that I got a chance to be in his life, a small part of his life, and got to experience him, because he, as Coach Thompson said all the time, you talk about simply one of the best. This dude was gold ribbon.
Yeah. I can remember so many times having conversations with you specifically, about some of the teams and that you were a part of. And you would always say, well, don't forget about Monty Coleman, because he was championship caliber on those championship teams. But, those teams and the teams you were on, you had Joe T, you had Rigo, you had Art. The next year in '83, started the ascending career of Darryl Green. But he was. Am I right though, from an athleticism standpoint? Like, he's one of the most athletic players on defense this franchise has ever had, right?
If you get a chance to get Richie Pettibone,
I know.
All I'm going to say to you is that
you loved him.
Richie was genius to me.
Yeah.
And because he never got the credit I think he deserved. Because, Richie was a player. I don't think it was, and I know I'm in the bag for him, and I don't really give a damn what the consensus say or whatever, because that means nothing to me. I saw the dude work, his matchups. The teams, when the Lions may not have been winning, but they had killer personnel, he matched up on them. And Monty gave him the ability to do a lot of things other people couldn't do. That's why I referenced Sonny Skiles. And I have to imagine, I don't know from the Commander's brain trust standpoint, but I would imagine they see him a lot like Bone. He gives them the ability that Monty gave Bone. And that is that I can match up with you and single him up with backs.
Yeah, and that run and shoot. Yeah, that run and shoot that Detroit had. Right.
Every gadget. Remember?
Yeah.
Every gadget offense of that era, Bone shut him down. And the intricate part to me in that was Monty, because he could cover backs, tight ends, receivers, and very few people can. So when I hear about Sonny, ever since they selected him, I've been going, okay, I've seen this. I hope he is Monty. I hope he can. That's a lot to live up to, but because it gives a new defense options. And this defense already is going to be more creative than anything we've had. Hopefully they'll tackle better than our last team did. And we got a chance to really scare the hell out of people because we can match up in a way that a lot of people can't.
Yeah, bringing up Richie, and I thought of him last night because when Tommy and I did that lunch with a legend thing, from back in the day, we did one with Richie, and
he's the best.
And the thing that I'll never forget, he loved Monty Coleman, and he was not a big fan of Wilbur Marshall, who was another freak athlete. Remember, when he played for them, but. He said Monty was so much more versatile and so much more coachable than Wilbur was.
Yeah. Well, they all had their the way Wilbur was raised in his environment in Chicago by a maniac. That was a perfect match. But it was to me like Bay. He was just fury, power and fury, and Tego. Anytime you can run like he ran and he's 230, and I just keep, and I don't want to do this to Sonny Skiles. It's not fair to him. But, Monty didn't sing his own virtues. He didn't beat his own wagon. Just so underrated. And for the skill and what he brought to us, special teams, offense, he could have done anything. And so, but I just know that the past decade has been rugged. It's been rough. And you hurt for anybody in your family or friends that has an injury that lingers on, or they've had it for years, and you're combating something no matter what the ailment is. Because if you care about them, then you hurt as they hurt.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Monty Coleman, and sympathies to the family. Yeah. For sure.
Appreciate you doing this, man, because a lot of people don't know. I've told you all the time because, again, I work for you, but that when you start talking about teams and what builds a champion, I just always smile at how many people that were so intricate to those championships never get mentioned.
I have found
that's the part for me that I always go, I get it, I understand, but it's just when I don't hear Nick Giaquinto's name, or when I say Otis Wansley's name not mentioned,
I knew you were going to say Wansley next.
Oh, of course, because that's why we won,
right?
No, I mean, and these three guys now, Mel Kaufman, Rich Malott, and Monty Coleman, that's why we won, and all three of them are gone now, and that's tough, man. It's but that's the whole components about a team. It takes so many different parts. You got to have a Monk, you got to have a Thousand, you got to have Riggo. You have to have these studs. And then, but if they could do it alone, they'd have 12 to 14 championships, but they don't.
Right.
And it takes all these parts.
Nelms.
And when he comes together with a great leader like Joe Gibbs, that's why it's so hard to attain. That's why chasing them, to me, is what life's all about. because you got all these imposters and salesmen and shanksters to come through it. But when you get the real group together,
right,
the real people, it's never what people think it is.
Right. Well, I think you know this, and if you don't, I have felt over the last 18 hours since this news broke, social media, and then just among, friends, Monty Coleman for a fan of a certain age is special, very special, and the memories of him holding that helmet up, the memories of him chasing down, backs from the backside, the speed, the special team stuff. And like you said, even from afar, outside looking in, always seemed to be team first and just a first-rate guy. So
always, and you get it, but you're the exception to the rule, and that's why I'm so honored that you had whatever happened, and I could fill in today because because you were not in my top. You weren't at the top of the list. I'm glad you were available after the first 5 guys I called weren't. I knew that you would be on this.
Right.
I knew you would. I said,
well,
he'll handle it.
The other reason we're going to run out of time, I wanted to see, because I know how much you love the draft and love to grade the draft. It's one of your favorite things to do. I wanted to know how they did versus your big board. But we can do that
like
next time.
I just told Anthony Haney, we just had a little meeting, pre-show meeting.
Yeah.
And I go, today's the biggest day for me because we signed undrafted free agents.
Right.
These people don't understand what round Bostic was drafted in.
Right.
And how good, and how none of this happens without Jeff Bostic. And that's the thing I laugh about this. And I'm not hating. Hey, man, go ahead and do your thing. Please yourself, pleasure yourself any way you want to, but
okay. Well, you know me, I don't do grades. I'll leave that up to other shows. I just would have loved to have known what your big board looked like at the end of the day.
My big board was really special because the Mystics are finally together and healthy, and I enjoyed watching them play. And
sorry about your loss. He was a teammate of yours, a championship teammate of yours. We're all gonna we've all been thinking nothing but positive thoughts about Monty Coleman. And thank you so much for doing this. I know how much you were in demand today, so it's much appreciated. I'll holler at you later.
All the best, my brother. Thank you, man.
Doc Walker, everybody. Thanks to him. Thanks to Ben. Thanks to Sean Springs, who was on the show earlier today with us. Back tomorrow. Chris is next.